Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Mukesh Pareek. I am today prepared with the lecture on post-colonialism. Friends, we are living in an age of posts, post-truths, post-modernism, post-colonialism. Sometimes we feel that what is the need of these isms in our life? What is the need of these isms to understand literature and culture? Post-colonialism, as the term itself suggests, that after colonialism. So, as a teacher of English literature, I find that modernism is a good approach. Postmodernism is also a good approach. Sometimes I personally like teaching structuralism and post-structuralisms. But the most baffling and intimidating term which has come across in my classrooms is post-colonialism. Whenever I discussed with my teachers, my students, I really could not pinpoint it, that whether this is really a critical approach or just a methodology to analyze a text, whatever. But still, in our different exams, they keep asking many questions on this term, post-colonialism. If I take liberty and try to explain this term based on different texts which are mostly canonical, I can easily explain this term like how on literature this can be applicable. For example, post-colonialism is it rejects, first of all, that any particular text has a universal value, which we all know that placed in India, which was a country where English people had ruled, and we know today, even my talking in English and you're taking English as a subject, it tells that we have not come out of the power dynamics present with this language, and the attitudes, the pronunciations in this language. And even as a teacher, I myself find that, I keep patronizing many times my students on a particular pronunciation. Though I myself know that we are living in a post-colonial era where everybody wants to go out of colonialism or any kind of power which tries to straitjacket our mind, our behavior, our identity, our culture, our way of wearing clothes. But it is very paradoxical and very ironical that if I deliver this lecture on post-colonialism, then I have no choice other than using English, which is a legacy of the English people to us. But let me not make it very confusing to all my students and the viewers. Let me come to the straight point that post-colonialism is an approach where we try to show, whether it is a writer or a way of living in a culture, that how the hegemony, the discourse, the power dynamics are still working on the way of living, way of thinking, culture, making certain things in course like to make the canon. In all these things, I find as a teacher that really It is very paradoxical that we talk about post-colonialism, but we have not come across any kind of colonial mindset. In fact, I feel that we are living in a neo-colonial era where there is again a hegemony working on us, either in the form of materialism, which has its own neo means new powers on us, which make us do what they want there in the market. A lot many things are there which I can share with you to explain this term post-colonialism. But let me begin with that whatever text we take in our post-graduation or graduation studies, and suppose we apply this ism, post-colonialism, on a text and try to analyze it, like how we can understand that whether this text has post-colonialism as a theory applicable on it or not, then we see that first of all we need to understand that is the writer creating some dichotomy, whether the writer is putting certain powerful positions or powerful positions to a set of characters, and the less powerful conditions on some other set of characters. Then what are the forces which are making the writer do that? This question is making us feel that, post-colonialism or how this post-colonialism works. So let me begin it very systematically, but I must tell you that this is something a very, very confusing term, paradoxical term. So I expect from you that you all listen to me very carefully, and I will do my level best to make you understand this term. Post-colonial criticism is a method of looking at culture and literature by rejecting the claims to universalism made on behalf of canonical Western literature. Now, this canonical Western literature means the syllabus we read in universities. That why, if we make a syllabus of English literature in Indian universities or any other university in the world, then why particular writers are considered to be holier than thou, and why we should read them only? Like, why should we read Hardy, and why should we make him the hallmark, like novel should be written in the same manner as he has created Wessex in front of us? It means a post-colonial criticism, it first of all rejects that there exists any kind of transcendental text which someone has to follow. Along with rejecting this universalism, a post-colonial critic seeks to show its limitations of outlook, especially its general inability to empathize across boundaries of cultural and ethnic differences. Cultural and ethnic differences are very tough to ignore. I remember very vividly the very famous essay written by Charles Lamb, Imperfect Sympathies, where very openly he says that he has his own prejudices against certain nationalities. So while he writes, I think he's making his stand very clear that he is a Westerner, he is a European, and I think he is the best and the others are not the best. A post-colonial critic achieves this end by examining the representation of other cultures in literature. They raise the questions of cultural difference and diversity, and also examine their treatment in relevant literary work. As I earlier discussed with you, like Wuthering Heights, where how Heathcliff is looked down upon and how Edgar is given all the rationality. Now this dichotomy, this diversity is, to decoding this diversity is the work of a post-colonial critic. They celebrate hybridity and cultural polyvalency. Friends, polyvalency means like in a country we find that people of different cultures live together, like carnivalesque, like different things show a conglomeration or coexistence either on the page of a novel or in a society. So this polyvalency is celebrated by a post-colonial writer or a critic. That is the mixing of more than two cultures. Now, let us talk about the critics and their works that have influenced this field of literary theory. The man who has exercised the greatest influence on the field is Foucault. Since Foucault's outlook of power, which he calls discourse in the inverted commas, is a system of statements within which and by which the world can be known. The independence movements around the world put an end to colonialism, as we all know, around 1950s. Yet the residual effects of imperialism continued to affect the cultures of the erstwhile colonies like India, that here till today we prefer the English medium schools. We prefer all the modes which are European in their soul, in their spirit. Now, which was the very first book which started talking about post-colonialism? Friends, before I talk in a very academic manner and talk about Homi K. Bhabha, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, Edward Said, Frantz Fanon, and many other writers, Swami Vivekananda comes to my mind, and Sri Aurobindo also comes to my mind. That I think before time those people were decolonized. They decolonized their minds, and I think I'm shocked that most of the Western writers and even Indian writers who have settled themselves in foreign countries, particularly in America and England and Canada, they have not been talking about these writers. But I think they first of all, when talked about Hinduism or talked about the cultural dominance, I think I'm using a wrong word of dominance. I think the cultural confidence of Indian cultural confidence they talked about many years back when people themselves had an iota of knowledge that what post-colonialism is. But because we are all in the foundations of the academic culture of writing and reading, let me talk about the way different critics have talked about different writers. So to my mind, the first writer is Frantz Fanon and his famous book, The Wretched of the Earth. It was published in 1961. It was published in French. In this book, Fanon argues that the first step for colonized people in finding a voice and an identity is to reclaim their own past. And I think when I talk about Aurobindo and Swami Vivekananda, I think they did the same. And the second step is to begin to erode the colonialist ideology by which that past had been devalued. This is the agenda of a post-colonial writer that they talk about, they write about, they argue about, they problematize it, they problematize that something has been imposed on them, on their culture, on their sensibilities, so that they can't think away from other than what is hurled upon them. Another major book is Edward Said's Orientalism, which was published in 1978. In this book, he argues by exposing the Eurocentric universalism, which takes for granted the superiority of what is European or Western and the inferiority of what is not Western. This is quite visible in almost every walk of life. If we see in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in India, the elite class, they all want to go abroad. Even I remember a show where Anupam Kher, the renowned veteran actor of Bollywood, he used to talk to some children, and the children were not more than the age of 5 or 6. And there, in one particular episode, if some of my viewers remember that episode, where the show is in English, and one particular boy, very I think not more than 7 years of, or 5 or 6 years of age, he was not talking in Hindi. Then Anupam Kher asked him that what is wrong? You can talk in Hindi. Then he says that it is the language of the ayah. Now I was dumbfounded. I was shocked that who informed that tiny tot that Hindi, which is the pride of this nation, can be the language of an ayah. But that is how colonial powers work on our mind, and this is the agenda of the post-colonial writers. Though it is, as I earlier said, that is very paradoxical that they write in English, and they try to decolonize certain things which were imposed on us. Edward Said, Homi K. Bhabha and Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak are called the Holy Trinity of post-colonialism. Though Spivak is a leading contemporary feminist deconstructionist who pays careful attention to issues of gender and race, she has brought to currency the term subaltern. Friends, I think I'm not using a very new term. You all have read A Passage to India by E.M. Forster, and there in the very first chapter, I think there comes the reference of subaltern, something who is lower in rank, the term's meaning is. And she has brought to currency the term subaltern. This term is influenced by the Italian thinker Antonio Gramsci. Spivak's famous essay, Can Subaltern Speak?, addressed the way a subaltern woman is constructed, as absent or silent or not listened to. She studies the muteness, in inverted commas, of women in post-colonial societies. The main argument of her essay is that between patriarchy and imperialism, the figure of woman disappears into a nothingness and marginalized position. It is interesting to note that Spivak uses the term subaltern for women, blacks, the colonized, and the working class. These, as she called, subaltern means lower, people of lower rank. The repressive dominance of white Western thinking, the deeper connotations of the displacement of the gendered and colonized subject by the imposition of internationalism and nationalism is the major agenda in this essay, Can Subaltern Speak? Friends, I would also like to talk about this concept of globalization and universalism. There are many Caribbean writers who have started talking about this killing concept of multiculturalism and globalization. Because in the name of globalization, we lose our identity. Because we are bound, suppose we go to the other country, all the diasporic writers, Salman Rushdie has talked about this in Imaginary Homelands also, that they live in an angst, in an existential condition where linguistically and existentially, they don't live happily there. It means in post-colonialism, in the coming time you will hear, there will be many writers talking, and I think, and I'm waiting that most of the writers will be from India. Because we have started talking about this, we have started feeling it, that someone in a multicultural atmosphere, until and unless everybody is not taught that what is the importance of a multicultural scenario, I think the concept of this other is stultifying and very killing. Because the people in the power, they make us feel that we are the other, we are the inferior. Western forms of thoughts inflict violence upon the East is the major concern of Spivak, as I earlier said, that this universalism is now looked upon very closely, and the writers are talking about that in post-colonialism, how much it is important to live in another country by suffocating our own desires, our own identities, our own festivals, where the dominance of the people in power, the people in politics, they exercise power on them, linguistically and existentially both. Even the now current term, the third world, Spivak says, is a creation of the West. Said, Edward Said I'm talking about, French Fanon and Spivak, they all attribute an absolute power to the hegemonic discourse, in which the native has no room for the resistance against the Eurocentrism. And at this juncture, we understand Bhabha, the third major figure. In the above said Holy Trinity, the Trinity I just talked about, Spivak, Edward Said and Homike Bhabha. Friends, Edward Said in his book Orientalism says that people of Western culture, when they come to the third world countries, they frame the people of the third world country. I can give one example to understand it, that suppose somebody has a camera in his hand and he is shooting somebody. Now, obviously the political power is in the hand of the person in whose hand there is camera. It means he is framing the other, the person whom he is shooting. You can easily understand this by one more example. You all are aware about Emma Woodhouse, the character created by in the eponymous novel Emma by Jane Austen. And you find that Jane Austen is preparing a portrait of a character. It means she feels that she is the power and the person whom she is framing is powerless. So this is the concept propagated by Edward Said. Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, as I just read about her, she talks about that women under the colonialism of patriarchy and Western culture has been muted. But in these both of these writers, they somewhere giving the absolute power to the Eurocentrism. And Bhabha, when he jumps into this bandwagon of criticizing Western culture, Western literature, the canonical things, he talks about with his key term, his key notion, and that is mimicry. Let us define this term, because in this term there lies the whole understanding that Bhabha, as a critic, does not give any power to the colonial people, the Eurocentric people, and he creates a site which is the site of resistance, which he has very typically termed hybridity. And let me explain these terms systematically now. Let me define this term. It is the fact that the colonizer in his or her relationship with the colonized is always vulnerable to the irreverence and mockery beneath the seeming servility of the colonized. Mimicry, as we all know, the very simple term, Lagan, that movie, in which we see that people, they are under power, the colonial power. But we see in many scenes that they are not ditto following the orders of their masters. And even the master is also vulnerable when he feels that his orders will not be followed. So this concept that the colonized makes fun of by not following him or by not obeying him, that this particular concept, this particular notion is termed as mimicry. Another important term by Bhabha is hybridity. This term has been taken from biology, and it is the in-between space, the site of resistance. Another important book in this category of criticism is Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak's book In Other Worlds. It was published in 1987. A very famous book, The Empire Writes Back, written by Bill Ashcroft, published in 1989. Culture and Imperialism, written by Edward Said. Friends, at the end of this lecture, I would like to add that any mode of criticism aims to make the reader aware of certain hidden political agendas of the hegemony is called postcolonialism. Postcolonialism corrects a reader's sympathies regarding the fluidity of identity, hybridity of language, and it awares him or her of the politics involved in the creation of the other, in inverted commas. I can just give a cursory and peremptory hint of W.B. Yeats's emotional blackmailing in the two Byzantine poems, where he creates the East, the Roman Empire, as the other. And the case of Wuthering Heights has already been discussed in this lecture. Friends, I have a very important book to show you. The Intimate Enemy, written by Ashish Nandi. In this book, its subtitle is Loss and Recovery of Self Under Colonialism. It talks about decolonizing oneself, and it can also be a part of post-colonialism. So there are many things yet to be talked about. I still feel that the lecture is this can be extended if I find a live lecture where my students ask questions and I answering their queries. I would welcome that. I humbly ask all of you to please share and subscribe my channel. You can find me on YouTube under the name of Dr. Mukesh Pareek or under the name of Cosmos, that is my institute. Thank you very much.